Joe and Bickson. So what do we need to know about results?
Well, you have a year of legends and losers and a year of extraordinary people talking about the accomplishments they've had in business, in sports, and in life. And I don't know about you, but when we listen to that, our first response is, oh my God, they're so great. If I could only be like that, if I had their parents or their circumstances or their education or the people that they've met or, then I could be like that. So I'm going to leave this conversation and I'm going to determine myself and I'm going to get myself to be in a way that then someday, somehow, I can eventually accomplish what they're accomplished. And so why do we think that? We think that because we have fundamentally misidentified what we call the source of results. So we are our current worldview. And the thing about worldviews it's a worldview. It's not like I get up in the morning and I can say to myself, what will be my worldview of today? No, I get up in the morning and my worldview thinks me. My worldview tells me about the world I live in. I don't tell myself about my worldview.
So we accept the thoughts of other people as the way it is.
Yeah, I like to use the word submit rather than yeah.
Yes.
Submit is like, accept is like, oh, okay, I'm aware of it and I'm allowing it to happen. Submitting for me is more like, okay, I'm going to let the truck roll over me.
Yeah, and as a martial arts fan, I love that too, because you submit when someone else is choking you out, and if you don't, you're going to die.
Yeah, exactly. So we submit unknowingly to the worldview. And
so let's make sure we underscore this. What is the traditional worldview, Bix, of results?
Yeah, the worldview of results is there's some external factors out there that determine what I can and cannot do, or some internal characteristics that either I have or I need to develop in order to accomplish what I need to do, or when I listen to your listeners, what they've accomplished.
So, for example, if I determine that I'm not confident enough, I have to go out and get some confidence. Would that be an example, or how should I think about it?
Well, I really like the way you talked about your basketball fellow.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a basketball fan, and I love the Warriors. They're really fun to watch. And, we have Steph Curry on the Warriors, one of the best basketball players in the world. And one of my frustrations when you hear a legendary player like that, or LeBron James, or, many of the legends we've had on Legends and Losers, we've had, Brent Jones, Super Bowl champion. And you talk to these folks and you can be left with, well, Brent's awesome, or Steph Curry's awesome, and he must have some skill or maybe something next to his spleen, some kind of an organ that makes him good at football or basketball, or Eric Weinmeier, the climber and extreme athlete, whatever it is. And I don't have that. And so that was a great story. But instead of being inspired to go for it in my own life, I'm actually left with the opposite, which is, shit, I should just, drink beer and pick my ass because I can't be like Steph Curry.
Yes. Yeah. And that we assign that cause to some internal characteristics. I don't know about you, but when I watch sports, oh, their father was a coach. No wonder. Or the musicians, oh, their parents they had guitars and pianos in their house. Therefore, whatever follows that. Now, does that help? Absolutely. Okay. I do wish I was Bob Dylan's brother, okay? Or something like that. Yeah. So I'm
or Jacob Dylan, his son.
Yeah. Now there you go. He's supposed to be an incredible guitar picker.
He's great. I've seen him live. He's wonderful.
Yeah. So it's not at all that we're uh, negating the circumstances, but we've misidentified it as our current worldview tells us that it's the circumstances that does determine the results that we can or cannot produce.
And that some of these people are just more talented, more, intellectual, more, they have something I don't have. That's the experience that occurs to me when I see Steph Curry interviewed.
Yeah. And I need to go out and get that. So what we're inviting people to consider is that our actions are not correlated to the circumstances. Our actions are actually in a dance with the conversations that we're listening to. So Steph Curry, the CEOs that you have on your show, the athletes, they have imagined, invented, created, declared, stand for a conversation that they then act consistent with. Okay? And the difficulty is that we have learned over the last 400 years, if you ask somebody, if you say to somebody, okay, here's the truth. Here's the truth. I want you to listen to it. This is the truth. What is the first thing they're going to ask you for?
Probably some handy tips,
And
some
yeah,
advice,
yeah, some evidence,
some to-dos.
Well, they'll ask you for, if you say, here's the truth, they'll say to you, okay, show me the proof of that. So we live in a world where we are certain for something to exist, we have to have evidence for it. So, but if you look at every breakthrough in the history of humankind, in business and in your own life, you or the people that you're speaking to did not have evidence for them to be able to act consistent with that they acted out of it because they invented, imagined, created a conversation that they then acted consistent with.
Right? When you say created a conversation, Bix,
Mm.
what does created a conversation mean? If I say, okay, I want to create a conversation for my own future, what does it mean to do that?
Okay, it means to take all of the past into account. So, okay, I've done this, I've done that. Here's the business landscape that's out there. Here's my competitors. Here's my product life cycle, all those things. I take that into account and I use that to inform me. But I now say, here's what I'm committed to. Here's what I'm inventing. Here's what I'm creating. Thinking is imagining. Okay? Having thoughts is what our mind does. Our mind tells us this and this feeling, that feeling, this reason. Okay? Thinking is to imagine, is to create, is to invent. So what happens is we forget that we have something to say about the way it goes. And when we forget that we have something to say about the way it goes, we don't have anything to say about the way it goes. So the people that you've interviewed over and over again, the way you listen to them, the way I listen to them, is they've invented a future for themselves, that they're then acting from that future, and they're learning and articulating in a way that other people can see that future. Okay? So we're inviting people to consider that the source of results is a conversation that each of us can create for ourselves and then act out of. Now, you create a conversation for your business that you're going to be the number one in your market. Okay? The moment after you create that, you're going to have all the evidence that you're not the number one in your market, right?
Funny how that shows up. Like, hey, 10 other folks are bigger than us or better than us or whatever.
Yeah. And that's the gap. That's the gap. And most people are invalidated by the gap versus the gap is there to tell us, oh, I see, this is the future I'm creating, and here's the gap. Now, what do I need to take the next step and the next step and the next step and the next step and the next step? And that's where you build the kind of capability to continue to invent in the face of no evidence, and evidence will begin to amass and amass and amass, and pretty soon people will say, oh, look at that person. They did this. Oh, they had their parents, they went to the right school. Oh, no, their parents were this way. Oh, they did this. Or they have the right body, the right shape, the right mind.
They went to Stanford.
Yeah, exactly. And so what we want to allow for all of us is to remember. And the word remember literally comes from remember, to put ourselves back together again, to remember that what distinguishes us as human beings is we've got something to say about. We're the only species that can say something and act out of it. And so all the people that you have on Legends and Losers have said what they're committed to in a way that they act from it, and they have other people around them see that conversation in a way that other people act from it also.
And Joe, if I want those kinds of results in my life, like so many of the guests who've been on, how do I listen to them in a way that allows their experience, their insight, their story to, if you will, empower me on my path, as opposed to the experience I think a lot of us have, which is, oh, they're awesome, I suck, fucking A.
Yeah, the cool thing about your podcast and the cool thing about when guests come on is that you listen to them, not coming from a separate place called, I need to somehow prove that I'm good enough. I need to somehow prove that this person is worthy of our listeners' attention. You come from a place called, this is a human being, and that human being has a story. And that story is going to be valuable for people if they can really hear what is underneath that story. And what is always underneath that story for each of us human beings is what Bix is saying, which is this intentionality, this way of viewing the world. The distinction is between what each of us wake up with, which is a worldview, and what we call a learned view of the world. And that means that in my listening to you, as I sit on the, at the gym or wherever I am listening to Legends and Losers, I'm hanging out with Christopher and I'm hanging out with your guest. And I'm not just hanging out. I'm learning what it is to be in that person's shoes. And that's what we say is a learned view of the world. So it actually is shaping the way that I see the world. Although it doesn't seem like that. It seems like I'm just getting a workout.
So I want to make sure I hear what you're saying, Joe. So if I want to, 10x my results in the next 12 months.
Yes.
And part of how I'm doing that is I'm consuming, these incredible dialogues, these incredible conversations with amazing people, and try to train myself to produce these kinds of results. What I think I hear you saying is, don't listen to them like, Luke Rockhold, UFC fighter, has some quote unquote talent that I don't have, and therefore I'm invalidated because I don't have the talent. Rather, I listen from a place of, if this, quote unquote kid from Santa Cruz can create a future for himself as a world champion, then I can too.
Absolutely. And listening from the place called, that kid from Santa Cruz, it wasn't what he was doing, as in it wasn't the, I'm going to go to the gym every day, I'm going to go practice this, I'm going to go practice that. It was actually the way that he was looking at the world, and the way we talk about that is, it was the speaking and the listening that he was paying attention to. It was the conversations, or the body of conversations that he was listening to, that allowed him to continue to create what, this world champion that he was going to be, in the face of whatever evidence that it was that he was not that at the time.
And so is what you're saying, guys, that if we want to create the future of our choosing, if we want to hack the future of our choosing, we have to stand in that future, and in the face of this massive gap between that future and the current reality, go forward into that future. So we sort of have to, with Steve Jobs, they used to call it his reality distortion field.
Yeah.
We sort of have to ignore, if we say, hey, we want to be number one and we're number 10,432, we sort of have to ignore reality, and to use the phrase I think you used earlier, Bix, dance with the future until the reality catches up.
Exactly. Yes.
Joe Bickson, Bickson, thank you so much for being on this episode of Legends and Losers Unlocked.
Thank you for being you, Christopher.
Thanks for having us.